Hi, my name is Donna, and I am going to be teaching you today how to play the game Hounds and Hares, which is an orienteering game that you use a compass for. Really important before you learn how to play the game is how to read a compass. Compasses come in all shapes and sizes, and many people think they actually know how to read a compass without really knowing how to read a compass. They think as long as the red arrow faces north, they're able to walk wherever, but it's a lot more complicated than that. This is an example of what an average looking compass looks like, and there's lots of sections on here that are important to learn about. The first is this big plastic piece is called the base plate. This section right here on the end is often rounded or sometimes even flat. And this is a section that is going to be important that students and or people using a compass know how to line up so that they get the directions correct. The next part is this large arrow up here on the top. This is called the direction of travel arrow. It means exactly what it says, the direction you are going to travel in. When you're using a compass, you always want it facing away from you so that you are walking straight in front of you. Humans don't tend to walk sideways or diagonally or backwards, so it's important to have this particular arrow facing away from you. The next section is this magnetic needle. The magnetic needle is often painted one section of red and one section of sometimes white, sometimes black. Most compasses I've seen are white. And this is telling us the direction we are going to be moving. The red arrow is always going to be facing north, which means the white arrow is always going to be facing south. So if you always follow this red arrow, you will always be walking north. And if you follow this white arrow, you will always be walking south. This particular needle is very fragile. It's balanced on top and here in the middle by a little tiny magnet. So if you swing compasses around or you smack them too hard on other items, they do fall off at times, and then the compass no longer works. The other thing that's important is it is changed by being near magnetic material. So if you're standing near metal or if you're standing near anything magnetic, it will change to that direction instead of our magnetic north. The next section is the dial. That is the circular piece here in the middle. It does turn. It turns all the way around, and you will notice on it that you have numbers starting from 0 all the way around to 360, obviously for a circle. And on these particular numbers, you will see that they're labeled by 20s, 20, 40, 60, 80, all the way around. You will notice a large line in between. These are your 10 marks, so 10, 20, 30, 40. And then in between, you have by 2s. So north being 0 or 360, we start at 0, and then it goes 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, all the way around. And those are going to be the degree markings that you are going to be walking. The next thing that's kind of hard to see on this particular example is there is a white etched line that's up here at the top. It does not move. It's etched inside the black or blue or red plastic that's underneath here. I'm not looking specifically at this north. If you move the dial, you will see that there is a white etched line that follows through here on the bottom that does not move when you turn the dial. It's also in line with your direction of travel arrow. This is your bearing marking. This is what you are going to line up whatever degree marking you are going to go. You're going to line it up with that tiny white etched line. The next is this particular arrow. This arrow is called the orienteering arrow. Many people nickname it the dog house or the soldier's house or the red shed. You can decide what you want to call it. I tend to call it the dog house. And then the red arrow ends up being the dog or the soldier or Red Fred. So the saying sometimes goes, put Red Fred in his shed, put the dog in his dog house. I forget the soldier in the soldier's hut, or I don't remember exactly, but I tend to use the dog in the doghouse because that seems to be kid friendly. Red Fred in his shed is also very rhythmic, so sometimes you can use that as well. Your decision. Now it's time to actually learn how to use a compass. Just as a quick reminder, these would be some of the things that you need to know before you go out. It's a lot more complicated than that. We also have measurement tools up here, so if you're using a map, you can find your way. We have orienteering lines, again, for using a map, but what we're going to be using are all of these different pieces today.
Hi, I'm Donna Wright. I teach 6th grade at Rome Corners Intermediate School. I also taught environmental education in New York and Connecticut and in Wisconsin for 8 years before that. So that's why I'm here to teach you a little bit more about the environment and some things you can do with kids. So as I mentioned in an earlier part of the video, is the magnetic needle here is on top of a very fragile piece that's balancing very carefully. And so if you do something to knock it very hard, it does not work anymore. Things that kids like to do besides hitting their friends with them or swinging them really quickly is what I call lifeguarding, where they take and they swing it around like this. So I often just yell, "No lifeguards," and that would help clue them in that they should stop swinging their compass. Another one that they sometimes do is just they get kind of lackadaisical and they just sit and do this. Again, it can destroy the compass, so I try to stop that behavior as much as possible. I always tell the kids if they're not using it, put it around their neck so they're not tempted to play with it. Oh. So one of the most important things to learn when you are going to use a compass is how to actually hold it. So the piece that's going to be important is the back side of this needs to be lined up flat with your body. I always tell students, because it's easier for them to remember, that if it's lined up flat against their belly button, it's easier for them to know a placement. The direction of travel arrow should be facing directly in front of you because we are going to be walking straight in front of us, not to the angle here, not to an angle here, and certainly not this direction. You'd be really amazed at how many students do the compass this way and cannot figure out why they are going the opposite direction of everyone else. So again, this flat part needs to be up against the belly with the direction of travel arrow facing straight in front of us. So now we're going to learn how to actually take a bearing. I've walked you through all the different pieces, but now it's time to learn how to actually do this. So the very first thing is if someone gives you a bearing, let's say 140 degrees, you're going to take your dial and you are going to turn it so that the compass says 140 degrees. The part I tried to explain earlier was this white etched line here in the middle. It doesn't move when I turn it. That's our bearing line. So we can line up 140 degrees right over that white section. Second thing we do then is to line up our compass like I taught you earlier, flat portion up against our belly. And then this is the part that sometimes kids get wrong. You are going to carefully turn so that you put the dog in the dog house. So the red arrow goes inside the red compass bearing on the bottom. And then we would know we are going to walk straight in front. Sometimes what kids do is they do this, where they try to turn their body like this, and you can't really walk very easily this direction. Another thing students like to do is to go too quickly, and so the arrow can't possibly keep up with them. So once you get the dog in the dog house, of course, if you want to take a look at this, the red arrow inside the bearing, not out like this, not out like this, but right inside so that you're going in the correct direction. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use this particular arrow and we are going to sight something in front of us. So what I'm seeing is a green post over there, and I'm going to now carefully walk. Of course, you can focus on me again. I'm going to walk looking and keeping the dog in the dog house and keeping my eyes straight on where I'm going so that I don't run into things like a tree. So now how do we play Hounds and Hares? There are two teams, the Hounds and the Hares, and each one does a little bit of a different job. So the first thing is the hares are going to be the ones that hides, and the hounds are the ones that are going to try to find them. So we'll start with the hares or the rabbits, and we are going to learn how to actually figure out where we're going to go. So this case, we're actually going to do the compass a little bit backwards. So what we're gonna do is we are going to take our compass, line it up with our belly button again, find a place that we wanna actually go to. In this case, we're gonna go to the big oak tree that's out behind where my house is. And I wanna line my direction of travel arrow up so it's pointing exactly in line as best as we can with the oak tree. And we wanna make sure that we take that bearing in the same place, because if I do it here versus if I do it here versus if I do it back here, I'm going to get a different reading each time. So I'm gonna find my spot. I'm going to line up my direction of travel arrow with the tree. And now I'm going to turn the dial so that the red arrow goes into the red compass direction, or the dog in the doghouse, like this. Now I know that this particular tree is about 286 degrees in front of me. So I'm going to have a little sheet of paper. I'm going to write 286 degrees on it, and I'm going to set it down for the rabbits to find us. And then we are going to go to the tree. We'll go to the tree, and then we will take our next bearing and go to that particular item until we find 2 or 3 spots. And then all of the hares are going to get down and hide in one place and stay super quiet so that the hounds can't hear them. Now we are gonna do the hares. The hounds are now going to find the hares. So we would come up and we'd say, oh, they started at 286 degrees. So we'll take our compass, we're gonna turn it to 286 degrees. We're gonna turn and put the dog in the doghouse. Mine happens to already be there. And we would sight to the tree. And we will go to the tree, find our next clue on the ground, hopefully take that bearing, and eventually find the hares that are hiding. If we don't take the bearing correctly, then you have to go back to where you started. So be careful about picking up all the sheets as you go, because it's possible you might need to go back to them. Again, it's important to tell the kids that they need to be kind of straddled over the top of 286 or whatever the degree marking is, so they know the direction they are going to be traveling.